And years later, like 20 or 30 years later, he confessed. He wrote a letter, he admitted that he had made the whole thing up, and at that point he was so famous, the world was like, oh, isn't that cute?
Yeah.
Whereas if they had known at the time, it might have derailed his career. So I definitely think that people make allowances for actors, much like we do for football stars, but to a degree, right? There are certain famous personalities, even in the modern day, who have maybe gone over the line. They're ranting in public, talking about things that we don't consider polite conversation or what have you, racial slurs and so on and so forth. And in the modern day, people are very quick to take offense to that sort of thing. So I don't know that we do it quite to the same degree as mayhap we used to, but I think it still happens.
Now, how do you relate to the set? Is it a fairly complicated one?
The set is the living room of the apartment, and there's a window box, ostensibly looking out over the street, a fireplace, a couple of doors, a staircase that leads up to the balcony, which is up to the roof. When John Barrymore rented this apartment, he built an addition on top of the apartment building, so the stairs go up to that. It's a large open space, and there's a little bit of furniture in there. In the first act, Andrew has just moved in, so it's kind of sparse. But then in the second act, it transforms dramatically, as within the story, Andrew has decorated the apartment the way it looked when John Barrymore lived there. Very extravagant, very medieval, a lot of tapestries and candles and lights and a throne and a Renaissance globe. There's all kinds of great stuff there. So in the second act, it's a bit more complex, but it is... It's very easy to move around in.
I was just going to say, what is it like to move around in?
And moving around in the scene, in the set, is fairly important, since there's a sword fight that ranges all back and forth and around and around.
Did you bring your sword?
I did not. I have a dagger, but...
Well, we'll settle for that. Well, as long as we're talking about scenery, who designed the scenery?
Dan Sheehan of the Footlighters. Did he design it? He built it. He designed it as well. So, yes.
And who's lighting the set?
Tony. I apologize. I've forgotten his last name.
Liapis.
Liapis. Yep. That's him. Yeah. Tony Liapis.
Well, what are your feelings about some of the characters? No, there is the relationship between the ghost and the hero, but how does he get along with these various people that you described to me?
Okay, so Barrymore and Andrew, they have a back and forth, because Barrymore has been summoned due to the fact that Andrew is going to play Hamlet, but Barrymore can't leave until Andrew does. And throughout the first act, there are forces at play battling over Andrew's decision. Gary, I mentioned, is his Los Angeles agent, and Gary wants Andrew to give up this whole Hamlet idea and head back to Hollywood and work on a new TV show.
Yeah.
So Barrymore and Gary are very much at odds. They're in conflict. They have opposite goals. So my interaction with Gary is suitably antagonistic to reflect that. With Andrew, I'm constantly trying to convince him that he has what it takes to play Hamlet and to give up any thoughts of Hollywood, at least for a time. With respect to Deirdre, Felicia, and Lillian, it's interesting because Barrymore was known as a womanizer. He had 4 wives,
I was going to ask
had a lot of affairs, was very active as a man about town, as a ladies' man. So Barrymore has a different relationship with each of the other female characters. So Deirdre is the young, beautiful, idealistic dreamer, and Barrymore's, though she can't see him, Barrymore's magnetism and attention has a direct effect on her, and he has the opportunity to manipulate her a little bit and engage in that sort of sexual tension back and forth with her. Felicia, I'll get back to her. Lillian, as I mentioned, she had a fling with Barrymore when she was young, when Barrymore was alive. So when she comes in while Barrymore's on stage, she can see him, and they have a bit of kind of fireworks as they go over, as she works with Barrymore to make him remember the fling that they had a long time ago. And then they have a very tender, romantic, beautiful moment as they sort of get together for one last fling. And then Felicia, the real estate agent, Felicia is an interesting case because she comes in, and it's throughout the second act that Barrymore is interacting with the women. And Felicia it's like throwing a tennis ball at a brick wall. She happens to hook up with Gary, and so when Barrymore tries to turn on the charm, nothing happens. And it's an amusing twist for Barrymore, who is known to have all these mesmerizing powers of allure, to just get absolutely nothing out of her.
Now, who's directing this masterpiece?
So Peter Bradley is our director, and Stuart Patterson is the assistant director.
And are there a lot of props?
There are. I forget how many bottles of champagne and flowers and swords and daggers and scripts and skulls and candles and vases and lamps. I get to smash things and crash things and throw them around. It's very entertaining, very prop intensive.
Fairly complex, then.
Yes. Roberta Kriegsman is our property master. She's the director of the props.
Now, Barrymore essentially gives Andrew a class on two subjects, playing Hamlet and how to romance.
Yes.
What do you think about what he taught? Did he score any points with you?
Well, I'm not certain that I would take Barrymore's approach to romance. But there's something to be said for a man who can quote Shakespeare at the drop of a hat and weave it into conversation and use it as as a flirtation device. So I'm sure my wife would be happy if I could quote Shakespeare fairly regularly. As it is, I tend to we won't go into my own personal life, but his lessons about Hamlet. There's one part where Andrew asks for any last advice before Andrew's about to go off. And it's actually one of the most challenging pieces in the play for me, because as my advice to him, my final advice to him, Barrymore recites the speech that Hamlet recites to the player king in the play. I mentioned how Hamlet has set up the play in which he's going to expose the king's murder. Well, the troupe that is going to perform that play, Hamlet gives them some advice right ahead of time, and it's one of the most famous speeches out of the play. To be or not to be, everyone knows that one, obviously.
That is the question.
Yes, but this one, "Speak the Speech," is it, and there are two pieces of the speech in the original play that have been excised and put together as one long speech. And so here I am on stage delivering one of the most famous soliloquies from Hamlet while portraying the man who was acclaimed as the best Hamlet ever. So there's just a little bit of pressure there. And I've been working on it very hard. First time through, a Shakespearean actor, the key, at least for what everyone tells me, is the actor really has to understand what he's saying, even if the words aren't exactly the language he would use in the modern day. So as a result, when the actor understands what he's saying, truly gets it, the meaning comes across to the audience, even if the words aren't exactly what they're accustomed to hearing. So I've been working hard to try to get that right.
Did you ever hear in your acting of a Shakespeare breath?
A Shakespeare breath? No, I don't know the term.
Well, there was a play at Huntington some years ago that I saw in which they used the Shakespeare breath, which is saying a long piece of dialogue without taking a breath. I just was curious if you had ever had to do that. And why would you? What would be the value in not breathing?
In musical theater, I know there have been a number of times where I've had to sing really long phrases without taking a breath in between.
That would be the musical version.
Right.
Yeah.
And I know that when people are able to hold a note for 16, 20, 24 beats, it's very impressive. I can only imagine that there's something similar at work here, where if I can speak for 30 or 45 seconds without breathing at any point in the middle, then that would come across as something very impressive. But then there's also the quality of your voice, right? You have to modulate your breath. If you use all your breath up early on and then you're sort of straining, trying to get the last few words out, then that's not gonna come across as well. So I honestly, otherwise, apart from simply showboating, from showing off that you have this ability, I'm not certain what the power of that is.
Well, I was kind of intrigued.
But now I'm going to go look it up when I get home.
Yeah, see, I'd be interested to see what you find out. Well, I think this is probably a good point in time for us to talk about the dates.
Okay.
And curtain times and how to get tickets.
Okay. So the dates are, the opening weekend is Friday and Saturday, February 3rd and 4th. The show times are at 8 o'clock on both of those nights. Then the shows continue the next 2 weekends. So that's the 10th, 11th, and 12th, and the 17th, 18th, and 19th of February. The Friday and Saturday performances are at 8 o'clock. The Sunday performances are 2 o'clock matinees. People who are interested in getting tickets can go online to www.footlighters.com, and there's an online box office that they can use to purchase tickets. They get to select their own seats. They can also call the Footlighters at 508-6688-446, and they can leave a message with the box office if there isn't someone there, and they can arrange to purchase tickets over the phone that way.
Now, in this class that Barrymore conducted, did he say anything about the bow that comes at the end?
Yes. So Barrymore, as a ghost who's tied to the apartment, can't actually go to see the play, and the second half of the second act is when Andrew comes back from the show, and Barrymore and Andrew are talking about what the performance was like and so on and so forth. But Barrymore points out that because he couldn't be there, he couldn't see the bow. So he asks Andrew to do the bow. And needless to say, it's not up to Barrymore's standards. So Barrymore does this whole over-the-top, intricate portrayal of what a bow truly should be. And it's quite involved and goes on for quite some time. And then afterward, Andrew gets to do his best to emulate Barrymore's bow.
Well, I've wondered about that. Is that where the expression break a leg comes from?
I've heard that that's the case. So breaking a leg is when you have to, in a traditional Shakespearean bow or traditional, you would bend over at the waist and kneel somewhat. So you are breaking your leg in that you're bending your knee. And I believe the origin of the saying comes from, you will actually get to the end of your show and have the opportunity to bow before the audience and thus break a leg as the audience is expressing their appreciation for the show.
I'm just looking to see if your microphone cord is long enough so you could demonstrate.
I could certainly try.
Yeah. Let's try to illustrate what you just told us.
The whole thing, or just the whole thing, or just the? I think if I did the whole thing, then that would sort of give it away. And
yeah, no, I don't want you to give anything away, but just wrap up our discussion about.
I will try to do a bow. Let's see. So, if I were bowing, so I might hold myself somewhat like this, and then in a very florid Shakespearean way, gesture and...
Oh!
So that's kind of a very flowery bow, whereas oftentimes you see in modern theater something a bit more restrained, something like a simple bowing at the waist. And in fact, in the show, that's what Andrew does. When Barrymore asks to see his bow, Andrew just does one of those, and then Barrymore says, no. Here's how it's really done.
Well, I want to thank you so very much. This has been a wonderful interview. I've learned so much.
Oh, thank you very much for having me.
I think that you could teach the subject and then some. I'm Shirley S. Timer, and you've been watching Artspace.